On the distant planet of Alton, the sun set behind the grand spires of the royal palace. The sky above was a vibrant mix of purple and gold, and the air was filled with a soft hum of excitement. It was the day of Zora's wedding. Zora was a proud owl, a member of a species that was known across the galaxy for its beauty, intelligence, and strength. Today, she was to marry the mate chosen for her by the ancient systems of her people. The owl had perfected the art of pairing the perfect mates for centuries. Their system, based on advanced genetic studies, intellect matching, and emotional resonance, never failed. Zora was about to marry the perfect man, or so she thought. The ceremony was set in a vast hall where guests from across the galaxy had gathered. The stone floors shimmered under the soft light of the floating orbs that hovered above. Their gentle glow illuminated the faces of the owl, each one proud and certain of the destiny laid out before them. Zora's chosen mate, Torin, stood at the altar waiting for her. He was tall, strong, and had the calm confidence that came from knowing he was the right match. Zora had seen him many times before, and he had always been kind and respectful. But there was something in her chest that stirred uneasily. Zora stepped forward, her white gown flowing behind her like a cascade of clouds. Her eyes were trained on Tyrone, but her mind was elsewhere. As she walked towards him, the weight of tradition pressed down on her. She had been told since she was a child that the system would always find her the perfect match. But as she neared Torin, she wondered if there was more to life than what was dictated by tradition. The crowd fell silent as Zora reached the altar. Torin smiled at her, his face radiating the calm assurance of someone who was confident in their place in the world. He reached for her hand and she took it, but there was a strange coldness in her touch. She could feel her heart beat faster, but not in the way she expected. There was a tension in the air that she couldn't explain. Before the ceremony could begin, the air was suddenly pierced by the loud roar of engines. A loud crash echoed through the hall, and the guests looked up in shock. From the high windows, they saw a massive ship plummeting towards the palace grounds. It was a human ship, an old model that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for centuries. The wedding was immediately forgotten as all eyes turned to the sky. The ship's engine screamed as it spiraled out of control, and with a deafening crash, it hit the palace grounds just outside the ceremonial hall. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the sound of tearing metal filled the air. Zora's heart raced. She had never seen a ship like this before. The human ships were ancient, built long before the owl had mastered space travel. What was one of them doing here now, during her wedding? The royal guards immediately began to move, ready to handle the situation, but Zora was frozen. Her eyes were locked on the wreckage where smoke billowed into the sky, where breath caught in her throat. Was anyone inside? The crowd murmured in confusion and fear, but Zora's gaze remained fixed. She felt an urge to see who or what had come from this strange, out-of-place ship. She could feel something pulling her toward the wreckage, as if her destiny had suddenly shifted. Torin, who had been standing by her side, turned to her, concern written across his face. "Zora," he said softly, his voice filled with authority, "we should go inside and wait for the guards to secure the area. This is not our concern." But Zora didn't move. She continued to stare at the wreckage, her heart thundering in her chest. She could feel a strange warmth spreading through her, something she hadn't felt before. It was as if the crash had woken something deep inside her. "I need to see," Zora whispered, more to herself than to Torin. She turned and began to walk toward the exit. "Zora, wait." Torin called after her, but Zora didn't stop. She knew that something was calling her to the wreckage, something that went beyond her duties as a member of the royal family. Ceremony was over before it even started, and she was about to step into the unknown. As she stepped outside the hall, the royal guard stood at attention, watching her as she approached the wreckage. Smoke billowed from the ship, but it wasn't enough to hide the twisted metal and broken pieces of the craft. Zora's heart sank. It was a miracle anyone had survived the crash. She heard a groan, followed by a faint voice. "Is anyone there?" Zora's heart skipped a beat. The voice was weak, but unmistakably human. She pushed through the smoke, her eyes scanning the wreckage. In the middle of the destruction, She saw him, a young man, barely alive, lying among the rubble. His dark hair was matted with dirt, and his clothes were torn, but his eyes were open, staring up at her with confusion. For a moment, their eyes met, and Zora felt a shock of electricity run through her. She could feel a strange connection with him, one she couldn't explain. He was a human, a species her people had little contact with, but in that moment, he felt like more, felt like something important, something that couldn't be ignored. The human blinked, as if surprised to see her. Who are you?" he whispered. Zora took a step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Zora, of the Owl. And you? Are you all right?" The human smiled weakly, his lips curling into a small grin. "I think I've been better." Zora's heart raced. She didn't know what to do, but she knew one thing for certain. This human had just changed everything. Her wedding, her life, and the future she thought she understood had been shattered by a single crash. For the first time, Zora felt a pull deep within her chest, a pull toward the human before her, a pull that couldn't be ignored. This part sets up the initial disruption of the wedding ceremony and the introduction of Jason, the human, who will bring change into Zora's life. It also hints at the growing connection between them, sparking curiosity for what will happen next. Ask Chat. Zora stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the human lying on the ground before her. The smoke from the wreckage still filled the air, and the noise of the wrecked ship echoed around her. But everything felt far away. In that moment, all she could see was the man. His brown eyes locked onto hers with a look of confusion. He was human. She realized the same species that was rare in their galaxy. Humans had not been seen in this part of space for many years, and no one had expected to encounter one here. Yet here he was, lying among the twisted wreckage of his ship. Zora felt her heart beat faster, a strange sensation that made her feel both nervous and curious. She had never been this close to a human before. Her people had never interacted much with them, and what little she knew about humans came from stories and history. They were known for their boldness, their unpredictability, and their stubbornness. But what Zora saw before her was nothing like the stories. This human seemed lost, confused, and hurt. Zora knelt down beside him, her white gown brushing against the ground as she moved. She looked at him closely. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his early 20s. His clothes were ripped, and dirt covered his face, but there was something familiar about the way he looked at her. His eyes, though clouded with pain, were full of life, full of questions. "Are you all right?" Zora asked gently, her voice soft, almost hesitant. She had spoken to many people in her life, but this moment felt different. There was an unfamiliar pull in her chest that she could not explain. The human blinked, his expression softening slightly. "I think I'll survive," he replied, his voice rough. "Not sure how I ended up here, but I'm glad you're here." His lips twitched in a faint smile. Zora didn't know how to respond. She'd been trained to be calm, composed, and controlled. But here, in front of this human, all of that training felt distant, as if the very air around her was making her heart beat louder than she had ever felt before. Before Zora could say anything more, the sound of footsteps broke her focus. The royal guards, led by Turen, appeared behind her. Their faces were tense, their eyes filled with concern. Turen was the first to speak, his voice firm and authoritative. "Zora, what are you doing?" Turen asked, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the human. "This is dangerous. You should be inside. We must get you away from here." Zora stood up slowly, her gaze never leaving the human. "Turen, this man needs help. His ship crashed. He's not from here. I can't just leave him." Turen's eyes flickered with surprise, but his tone remained calm. "It's not our concern, Zora." The wedding's over," Zora interrupted, her voice stronger than she intended. She turned to face Turen, her eyes flashing. "This is something else. I can't explain it, but something about him, something about this moment feels important. Don't you see? We can't just leave him here." Turen stared at her for a moment, his face unreadable. You've never been this emotional, Zora. This human has disrupted everything. He's nothing but trouble. We must deal with this quickly. Zora's chest tightened at his words, but she didn't back down. I will not turn my back on him, Torin. I'm doing what feels right. The tension between them was thick, but Zora ignored it, her attention still focused on the human. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, a feeling she had never experienced before. Torin had always been reliable, calm, and perfect for her at least. That was what her people said, but now, standing beside her, his words felt harsh and distant. She wasn't sure what had changed, but Zora knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. The human tried to sit up, wincing in pain. You don't have to help me. I'm not from your world, and I'm not sure what I've done to deserve it. But I won't be a burden. Zora crouched down again, her voice soft. You're not a burden. You're just in need of help. She extended her hand to him. Let me help you. The human hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached out and took her hand. As their fingers touched, Zora felt a strange warmth spread through her. It was a simple touch, yet it felt like something more. Torin stepped forward, his voice cold. This is foolish, Zora. You're making a mistake. He looked at the human. You will leave here now. We'll take care of you, but we can't let you stay. Zora's heart pounded in her chest as she stood up, helping the human to his feet. You don't understand. He needs time to recover. We can't just send him away. Torin's eyes were filled with frustration. Zora, he doesn't belong here. The AL have rules, and this human, he's disrupting everything. The council will not approve of this. We can't allow him to stay. Zora looked at Torin, then back at the human. The feeling inside her grew stronger. It was not just a pull to help him, it was a pull to protect him, to keep him near. She didn't know why, but Zora felt that somehow this human, this stranger, was tied to her fate in a way she could not explain. I don't care about the council, Zora said quietly. This human is not just anyone. I can't turn away from him. Torin's face twisted in anger. You are making a mistake, Zora. But Zora wasn't listening. She turned to the human, her voice calm and steady. Come with me. Sure, you're taken care of. And as the two of them began to walk away from the wreckage, Zora couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. The human followed her, his eyes never leaving her, as if he, too, felt the pull between them. In that moment, Zora knew that what had just happened was more than an accident, was the start of something new. This part deepens the connection between Zora and the human, while also introducing conflict with her arranged mate, Torin. It sets the stage for the challenges Zora will face as she begins to question her path. Let me know if you'd like. The days after the crash were full of questions, confusion, and unexpected emotions for Zora. She had never imagined that a human, especially one who had crashed into their world without warning, could stir something inside her. Yet there she was, helping him recover, taking care of him, and finding herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. Jason, the human, was recovering quickly. His injuries were minor scrapes, bruises, and a few cuts from the wreckage, but Zora had insisted that he stay in the palace for safety. She had taken him to one of the guest chambers, where he could rest, eat, and regain his strength. The palace staff had been instructed to treat him with respect, though their curiosity about him was palpable. They had never seen a human before, and even Zora's royal status couldn't keep them from whispering behind their hands. Zora couldn't help but notice how Jason's presence seemed to make everyone uneasy. He was an outsider in every sense. His strange clothes, his earth accent, his way of moving everything about him screamed that he didn't belong. And yet, when Zora was with him, she felt something else, a calmness, a sense of peace that she had never known with anyone else. One evening, after dinner, Zora found herself sitting with Jason in the garden. The stars above were brilliant, and the soft breeze carried the scent of the flowers. It was a peaceful night, and yet Zora's mind was anything but peaceful. Her thoughts kept returning to the human sitting beside her. Are you sure you're feeling better? Zora asked, her voice soft. She had been asking the same question every day, but she couldn't help herself. She wanted to make sure he was all right, even if she couldn't understand why she cared so much. Jason smiled, the warmth of his smile doing something strange to her heart. "I'm fine," he said. "Better than I expected, considering I crashed a ship into a palace." Zora laughed softly, the sound filling the night air. It was a laugh she hadn't realized she needed until now. She had spent so many years being serious, focused on her responsibilities, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something lighter, something free. "I never expected to meet a human this way," Zora said, her voice quieter now. "You're not what I imagined." Jason turned to look at her, his eyes locking with hers. "What did you imagine?" Zora paused, unsure of how to answer. She had always thought of humans as distant, foreign beings. She had never considered how they might feel, how they might think. But something about Jason made her rethink everything. "I don't know," Zora said, shaking her head. "I suppose I thought you'd be different, more distant, but you're not." Jason raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in his eyes. "Is that a compliment?" Zora couldn't help but smile, despite the tension that was building inside her. She had always been in control, always the perfect royal, the perfect match for her society's expectations. But now, with Jason, she felt as if everything she had been taught was being turned upside down. "I guess it is," Zora said, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. She quickly looked away, hoping he didn't notice. Jason's smile softened. "I don't know how I ended up here, but I'm glad I did. You've been kind to me, Zora, more than anyone else would have been. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you for that." Zora's heart tightened at his words. She hadn't expected him to say that, but it stirred something deep inside her. She had always been taught to be strong, to never show weakness. But something about Jason made her want to be vulnerable, to let her guard down. "You don't need to repay me," Zora said quietly. "You're here now, and that's enough." The air between them grew thick with unspoken words, and Zora felt the strange pull between them again. She had been ignoring it for days, trying to push it down, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. Jason was different, and she was drawn to him in a way that she couldn't explain. As the night wore on, Zora and Jason sat in silence. The only sound, the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze. Zora couldn't stop thinking about the way Jason made her feel. It was as if he saw her for who she truly was, not just the royal princess everyone else saw. He didn't care about her status or her responsibilities. He cared about her, Zora, the person. And that was something she had never experienced before. The next few days passed quickly, and Zora found herself spending more and more time with Jason. She showed him the palace gardens, took him to the library where he marveled at the ancient texts and shared stories of her people. With each passing day, the connection between them grew stronger, and Zora found herself struggling to deny the feelings that were blooming in her heart. But there was still one problem: Torin, Zora's arranged mate. Torin had not been pleased with Zora's decision to take care of Jason, but he had not openly protested, at least, not yet. Zora knew he was waiting for the right moment to speak to her about her duty to their people, about the importance of following the traditions. But Zora couldn't ignore what she felt. Every time she looked at Jason, her heart raced, and she found herself wanting to be near him, to learn more about him, to understand the strange connection between them. But what about Tyrone? What about the future she had been promised, the future that had been decided for her since birth? Zora didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for certain: her life was changing. And no matter what happened next, she couldn't ignore the way Jason made her feel. She couldn't deny the growing attraction she felt for him. But was that enough to change everything she had known, everything her people had taught her? Zora wasn't sure. But for the first time, she felt like she was ready to find out. This part deepened Zora's internal conflict, showing her growing feelings for Jason, while also introducing the tension with her arranged future with Torin. The connection between Zora and Jason becomes more evident, and her feelings of attraction grow stronger, setting the stage for the challenges ahead. Let me know if you need further. Zora couldn't sleep. Her mind was restless, filled with thoughts of Jason. The connection between them had only grown stronger, and it wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something that pulled at her heart whenever she was near him. But what about Torin? What about her duties as the future ruler of her people? Zora had been trained her whole life to follow the path set before her, to fulfill the role that had been chosen for her. She had always been told that she would marry Turan, and their union would bring stability and strength to their society. But now, with Jason's unexpected arrival, everything had changed. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. By her window, Zora gazed out at the stars. The night sky was beautiful, vast and full of possibilities. But tonight, the stars seemed far away, like they no longer held the answers she was searching for. Her heart ached with the weight of the decision she had to make. Jason had been kind, understanding, and most of all, real. He didn't care about her royal title or her future responsibilities. He saw her for who she truly was. Zora couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her like that. The pull she felt toward him was undeniable. But was it enough to turn her back on everything she had ever known? The next day, Zora found herself walking through the palace gardens with Jason. The flowers were in full bloom, their vibrant colors filling the air with their sweet scent. Jason had a genuine curiosity about everything, asking questions about the plants, the architecture, and the history of her people. Zora had never met someone so eager to learn about her world, and it made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. "Do all the flowers bloom like this?" Jason asked, kneeling, to examine a rare blue flower that only bloomed once every 10 years. Zora smiled. "Not all of them. This one is special. It's called the moonflower. It only opens when the moon is at its highest point in the sky." Jason looked up at her with a soft smile. "I wish I could stay longer to see it bloom." Zora's heart skipped a beat. "You could... There's no need to leave yet. You're not a prisoner here, Jason." Jason's smile faded a little as he stood. "I know, but I feel like I'm in the way." "You have a life here, Zora. A life that doesn't include me." Zora's throat tightened. "That's not true. You're not in the way," Jason shook his head. "I am. I'm just a human, a stranger in a world that doesn't want me here. You deserve someone who can give you everything, someone who can be part of your world." Zora reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm. "Jason, you're more than that. You've changed everything for me. You've made me see things differently. I've never met anyone like you." Jason looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "And what about Torin? What about your people?" "They won't accept me, Zora. You know that." Zora's heart sank. She had known that this would come up, but hearing Jason say it out loud made it feel all too real. Her duty to her people, her responsibility to follow the path set before her was all so clear. But standing here with Jason, everything she had been taught felt wrong. She didn't want a life of duty and expectations. She wanted something real, something like what she felt with him. "Torin is my future. I know that," Zora said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But the more time I spend with you, the more I realize that what I'm supposed to do, what everyone expects of me, doesn't feel right anymore. I don't want to live a life of expectations, Jason. I want to live a life of my own." Jason's eyes softened. "Zora, you don't have to choose me. You have to choose yourself." Zora's heart clenched. She didn't know what to say. Jason was right, but how could she choose herself when the whole galaxy had been built on a set of rules she was meant to follow? The owls' traditions, their way of life, they were sacred, and breaking them would mean more than just turning her back on her people. It would mean risking everything she had ever known. "I don't know if I can," Zora admitted. "I don't. No, if I can throw away everything I've been trained for, everything my people expect from me." Jason took a step closer to her, his voice gentle. "Then don't throw it away. Take it with you, but live for yourself. Don't live for anyone else. I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm asking you to choose what makes you happy." Zora closed her eyes, trying to process everything. The words Jason had said felt like they were echoing in her mind. He was right. She had spent her whole life trying to live up to the expectations of others. But now, with him here, she had to ask herself, was that the life she truly wanted? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Torin appeared at the edge of the garden, his face hard and unreadable. Zora felt a tight knot form in her stomach. She knew this was the moment when everything would change. Torin, Zora said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. What are you doing here? Torin's eyes flickered to Jason before. Returning to Zora, I've come to speak with you, he said, his tone calm but firm. We need to discuss the future, Zora, the future of our people, and the future of this alliance. You cannot ignore your responsibilities. You cannot allow a human to pull you away from your duty. Zora's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this conversation would come, but now that it was here, she didn't know how to respond. She looked at Torin, then at Jason, and felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. I have made my choice, Torin, Zora said, her voice filled with determination. Choose what is right for me. Torin's face stiffened. Isn't just about you, Zora. This is about all of us. You cannot abandon your people. Zora looked back at Jason, his eyes full of understanding. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't ignore her heart any longer. I'm not abandoning anyone, she said, her voice strong. I'm choosing to live my life on my own terms. The decision had been made. Zora had chosen herself, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. This part delves into Zora's inner conflict and decision to take control of her life. The tension with Torin increases, and Zora begins to make a choice about her future, ultimately deciding to follow her own heart. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. Ask. Chat. The tension in the air was thick, and Zora could feel it in her bones. The grand hall, once filled with excitement and joy, now felt empty and cold. The day had arrived, the day she was supposed to marry Torin, the man chosen for her by the system. The ceremony was meant to solidify the future of her people. But now, Zora's mind was far from the wedding vows she was supposed to make. She had made her choice, but she couldn't deny the pressure that weighed on her. The AL people had never seen a royal decision like this, especially from someone like Zora, a future ruler choosing to follow her heart instead of the traditions that had guided her people for centuries. The entire palace was waiting for her to appear, for her to take her place beside Torin. But Zora stood before the mirror in her chambers, her reflection staring back at her with uncertainty and resolve. The gown she wore was beautiful, designed to symbolize her status and her role in the Owl Society. It shimmered with intricate patterns, its fabric a blend of deep blues and silvers. But as Zora touched the fabric, it felt foreign to her, like something she was never meant to wear. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had made her decision, but the reality of it still hit her like a wave. Could she truly abandon the life she had been raised to lead? The weight of her people's expectations hung heavily in her mind. But then she thought of Jason, his face, his smile, his eyes that had seen her. Not as a royal, but as Zora. Her heart was certain, but her mind still hesitated. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Zora, Torin's voice called through the wood. It's time. The guests are waiting. Zora hesitated for a moment, then opened the door to find Torin standing there, dressed in his ceremonial robes. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker of frustration in his eyes. He had always been calm, composed, and confident, the perfect match for the future ruler. But today, Zora could see the unease beneath the surface. He knew what was coming. Torin. Zora said softly, her voice steady. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. I can't marry you. Torin's eyes widened in shock, and his mouth opened to speak, but no words came out at first. He blinked several times as if trying to process her words. Zora, he finally said, his voice tinged with disbelief. This is not how it was meant to be. You are the future of our people. Our marriage will unite us, bring strength and stability. Zora shook her head. That's what I've always been told, but it's not what I want. I don't want to be bound by tradition anymore, Torin. I don't want to marry someone just because it's expected of me. Torin's face tightened, and he stepped forward, his expression becoming more intense. You think this is easy for me? Do you think I want to lose everything we've worked for? Everything we've been taught to build together? Zora took a step back. I'm not asking you to lose everything. I'm asking to live my own life. That life doesn't include a marriage to you. Torrin stared at her, his jaw clenched. For a moment it seemed like he was about to say something harsh, but then he stopped himself. I see, he said coldly. You've made your choice. Zora felt a pang of sadness in her chest, but her resolve remained. I have. Torrin turned away, his shoulders stiff with anger. Then I will not stop you. But you must know, Zora, that you are making a mistake. The consequences of this will be far-reaching. You will not just be turning your back on me, but on everything our people stand for. Zora didn't respond. Instead, she watched him leave, feeling the weight of his words in her chest. She had made her choice, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. She looked out the window at the palace courtyard where the ceremony was supposed to be taking place. Her heart was heavy with the knowledge that her decision had already caused a ripple through the palace. Guests, the council, the royal family, they were all waiting for her to fulfill her role. But she couldn't, not when her heart was telling her to do something else. Zora turned away from the window and walked to the door. She had to see Jason. She had to tell him what was happening. As she stepped outside, the sunlight hit her face, and she felt a rush of freedom mixed with fear. She walked quickly through the palace halls, her heart racing. She had to find him before the ceremony could begin. When Zora finally reached the guest quarters, she saw Jason standing near the door, looking out at the garden. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Zora. His voice was filled with concern. Is everything all right? Zora walked up to him, her chest tight with emotion. I've made my decision, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I can't go through with it. I can't marry Torrin. Jason's eyes softened with understanding. Zora, he said gently, reaching out to take her hand. You don't have to explain it all. I know this isn't easy. Zora looked at him, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. But I need you to know. I'm choosing you, Jason. I'm choosing what's in my heart, and I can't ignore it anymore. Jason's face lit up with a smile, though there was still a hint of worry in his eyes. Are you sure about this? It's going to change everything? I don't want you to make this decision for me, Zora. Zora nodded, her eyes filled with determination. I'm making this decision for me. I want to live my life, Jason. I want to be with you. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Zora turned to see the royal guards approaching. They were here to escort her to the ceremony, and she knew that this was the moment. She couldn't go back now. I have to face them, Zora said quietly, squeezing Jason's hand. But I wanted you to know, this is my choice. Jason nodded, his expression serious but supportive. Whatever happens, Zora, I'm with you. Zora took a deep breath and turned toward the approaching guards. This was the moment that would define her future. She wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but one thing was clear. She had chosen her own path. And for the first time in her life, Zora felt like she was finally in control. This part highlights Zora's final decision to break from tradition and follow her heart. The tension with Torrin escalates, and Zora's courage grows as she prepares to face the consequences of her actions. Let me know if you need further adjustments. Ask chat. The palace was silent, except for the soft sound of Zora's footsteps as she walked through the grand halls. The tension in the air was thick, but Zora's heart beat with a strange mix of fear and excitement. She had made her decision, and now she had to face the consequences. There was no turning back. She had chosen to live for herself. And that meant breaking away from everything she had been taught, everything that had been expected of her. The royal family, the council, her people, they had all been waiting for her to make the perfect match with Torrin. But Zora couldn't pretend any longer. She couldn't marry someone just because it was what she was supposed to do. She made her way through the palace. She found herself thinking about Jason, his face, his kindness, the way he made her feel. He had shown her a side of life that she had never known, a life where she could be herself, without the weight of tradition hanging over her. He had given her the courage to make a choice that felt true to her heart. Zora stopped in front of the grand doors to the ceremony hall. She could hear the murmurs of the guests on the other side, all waiting for her to appear. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had never felt more alive, yet more uncertain than she did in this moment. The doors swung open, and Zora stepped into the hall. The guests fell silent, their eyes immediately turning toward her. In the center of the room stood Torin, his face calm, but his eyes filled with frustration. He was surrounded by the council and the royal family, all of whom looked at Zora with varying degrees of disappointment and concern. Zora took a deep breath and walked toward Torin, her eyes not leaving his. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her, but she stood tall. She couldn't let their judgment shake her. "Toran," Zora said, her voice steady but soft, "I cannot marry you. I've made my decision." Toran's jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed. "Zora," he said, his voice cold, "you can't. Be serious. This is the moment we've both been preparing for. This marriage is not just about us. It's about the future of our people." Zora shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. "I know what it means, Toran. I understand the importance of the union, but it's not my future anymore. I have to live for myself." The guests murmured in disbelief, and Zora could see the shock on their faces. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, but she knew this was what she had to do. Torin stepped forward, his voice rising. "You are making a mistake, Zora. You can't just throw away everything we've built. You can't walk away from the future of our people." Zora's chest tightened. She could feel the pressure of the room, the weight of centuries of tradition, but something inside her pushed her forward. "I'm not throwing it away, Torin. I'm choosing something different, something that feels right for me." Torin looked at her with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "And what is that? A human? Someone from another world, another galaxy?" His voice was sharp, his words cutting. "You're willing to risk everything for a stranger? For someone who doesn't belong here?" Zora's heart clenched at his words, but she stood her ground. "Jason is not just a stranger. He's someone who sees me for who I am, not for my title or my duty. He's someone who makes me feel alive in a way I've never known." Torin's face reddened with frustration. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You've lost your mind." "Zora." Zora's heart sank, but she didn't look away. "I haven't lost my mind, Torin. I found my heart." The silence in the room was deafening. The guests were still watching with wide eyes. The council members exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. But Zora didn't care anymore. She had made her choice. "I'm sorry," Zora said softly, "but I can't marry you. I can't live my life for anyone else but myself." Torin stared at her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the hall. The guests remained silent, their eyes following him as he left. Zora stood there, her heart racing. She had done it. She had made the choice that had been weighing on her for so long, and now she had to live with it. But for the first time, she felt a sense of peace. She had followed her heart, and that was all that mattered. As Zora turned to leave the hall, she saw Jason standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with hope and understanding. He stepped forward, his expression softening as he reached for her hand. "You did it," Jason said, his voice filled with pride. "You chose yourself." Zora smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "I did." They stood there for a moment, their hands clasped together. The rest of the world could wait. Zora had made her choice, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. With Jason by her side, she felt like anything was possible. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready for whatever came next, because she knew she was living her life for herself, not for anyone else. And that, she realized, was the true beginning. This part shows Zora's final stand, making her decision clear to Torin and the council, and the support she finds in Jason. The tension reaches its peak as Zora finally chooses her own path, setting the stage for what comes next. "Let me know if you'd like any adjustments," asked Chat.